Hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm Debbie Schwartz, founder of Road to College and the Paying for College 101 Facebook group. And I am here tonight with Brad Schiller, co-founder of Prompt. And we are talking about essays. So let me just do a little housekeeping to make sure that people can join a little later. Thank you so much we got a lot of people sending in topic ideas and sending in their essays. I forwarded them to Brad, and honestly, he's just going to randomly pick. So, and we're not going to show anybody's name. So, but there's a lot to choose from tonight. And kind of before we get started, love to know who is here. I don't know, Brad, if you have any questions you want to ask people.
I always ask, there's a couple things to drop into the chat. One is on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you in your child's essays currently? Whatever status that is. So you think they're going to be, how confident are you feeling right now? And then second question is, where are you in the essay process? Are you done with a common application essay, done with your supplements or extra essays that you have to write for certain schools? Have you even started yet? Is there a draft? Is there even an idea for a topic? Like, where are you? Drop that into
I'm kind of curious, even if you're still working on the college list, because that kind of plays in if you don't know all the schools.
It definitely does. As well. There's a lot of I haven't started essays at all. A lot of haven't started. Great. I would assume if you're here tonight that a good number of you are probably in the haven't started or early drafts, maybe not a huge amount of confidence in it. And what our goal is tonight is to make sure that you have the tools at your disposal to help your students, get their essays planned and get them written and get them done well, right? So that's kind of our goal.
It's an important point. This is a combination of project management, right? Because just figuring out how much work needs to get done, how to be efficient at it, and then actually, doing the right work in a way that you're going to get the results. They're going to get the results that they want by understanding who your audience is.
Yep. All good. Well, Debbie, do you have other housekeeping items, or we're going to?
Nope. I think we just dive in because if we want to get to the essay review,
we're going to try to get to as many essays as possible that various people have sent in. Basically, when we get to that point, whatever essays show up on my screen first that I had opened are the ones that we read. But I have not looked at any of the essays actually ahead of time. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And there's just, a few things that kind of we cover or are going to cover today. Number one is we're going to talk about how colleges actually evaluate applicants. This is really important because you have to understand your audience in order to understand what to write about, right? Simple as that. And yet the vast majority of students that are writing college essays, guess what? They actually don't understand their audience before they actually start writing something. And you're going to see that a lot, most likely, with the example essays that we see later and the topics that we're going to take a look at as well and provide feedback on. The second thing we're going to cover is what colleges are and aren't looking for in essays. We're going to do some live feedback on essay topics. We're going to talk about what is the strategy, what is the ideal strategy for actually completing your applications at this point. You're not too late getting started. Too late getting started is basically 2 days before the applications are actually due, which, by the way, 90% of all people submit their applications within 2 days of the deadline. Okay, don't be that person. We're going to talk a little about Prompt's college application and essay coaching this evening, and then we're going to do some live feedback on as many of the essays as we can get through as we can. This is a real quick intro to Prompt. We're the world's leading provider of college admissions essay and application coaching. Last year, we coached over 6,000 students one-on-one on their college applications and essays, including hundreds of road to college families. And as we like to say, there's nobody like your student, right? You know this, but now we actually have to prove it. You got to prove it to the admissions officers. And that's actually really hard within writing, but we're going to talk about how to do that this evening. Okay. If you want to, learn anything about our services, you can go to prompt.com/road-to-college during or after this session. Debbie's going to drop that into the chat, but that's enough for the housekeeping items for now. Okay. So what do admissions officers actually care about, right? Having a really good understanding of our audience is critical to understanding what we need to write about. Okay. What do they actually care about? What do they want to know about our students? Okay. And the answer is that what they care about is that your student will succeed in college and that your student will succeed after they graduate. This is really important. And why is this important for them? One is, well, they want to know if they accept your student into their college, that your student is going to do well in school and they're going to graduate. Okay, that's really important for them. That affects certain metrics that might affect their US News rankings. They also want students to go and have successful careers because that reflects well back on the school. They want the student to have a good experience at the school, so they tell their friends to also apply to the school. This creates like a very important cycle of student success at college, leads to more students applying to the college. They can raise tuition, all that sort of fun stuff that they really care about. This is the most important thing that you need to understand. Your goal is to prove that your student is going to be successful in college and after they graduate. That is the entire purpose of the entire application. What they're trying to do is they're trying to understand what is your student's potential. Okay, that's what they're evaluating, which basically means that they're going to succeed in college and after they graduate. Okay, so let's talk about actually how are the applications scored. Okay, so most colleges use what's called holistic admissions, which basically means they have an excuse to accept whoever they want to. Okay, that's the easiest way to think about it. Now, there's basically two major things here. One is the academic score, which is basically an evaluation of grades, the strength of curriculum your students take in. Actually, what high school you attend matters quite a bit, because like students that may have come from your high school and were successful at that college in the past is a good indicator that your student also might be successful at the school. Test scores, if you are submitting them as well. Then our primary focus tonight is on the personal score, which is like all the non-admission stuff. And we'll talk more about how do these kind of interplay together, but these are like the activities, that your activities list, and really like how you write about them, your essays, what you write about, how you write about it, recommendations, interview. And then colleges have a bunch of other priorities that honestly, like, you can't affect too much, but demonstrated interest is one that you can affect with like the writing really good YS essay. But they also care things about like family income, first generation, geography, legacies, athletes, a bunch of other stuff that you can affect, right? You also can't really affect probably your academic score very much right now. So what really comes down to is this personal score, and this is what we're going to be talking about quite a bit tonight, is how do you make sure you improve that and why does that matter, okay? So the easiest way to think about this is that colleges basically evaluate academics and they evaluate the personal score, and the higher both of those are, the more like your student is to get in. Simple, right? The other couple of important concepts though here are, one is there's an academic bar, okay? And the academic bar is that above the academic bar, your student's likely to succeed academically at that college, okay? Be below the academic bar, and those students are almost never admitted to a particular college because those students may not succeed academically at that college. And a lot of the colleges actually have a lot of data on this, right? So they know students that have taken certain classes, come from certain high schools, come from, have certain grades, test scores, maybe that sort of thing. They actually run a lot of this data and they look at, okay, what were the things that actually were indicators of student success from a previous academic perspective, okay? And that's how they set this. What's nice about this though is that what that means is that once you're above the academic bar, that means the school believes you could succeed academically at their school, okay? And so once you're above that bar, the personal side of the non-admission side of the applications become more and more and more important, okay? And we're going to talk about why that is. There's also a personal bar. Basically, very few people are below the personal bar because basically you have to write in your application things that signal you have possible character flaws, like, hey, I stole a bunch of stuff, right? Don't write about that. That's very rare. But what really matters is like how far above these bars you are. And in particular, as we'll see, how far above the personal bar you are matters more than how far above the academic bar you are. Okay. The other really important things is that strong academics are just not enough. Okay. Selective colleges have far more academically qualified applicants than they have spots. Okay. Generally speaking, the data shows that because students self-select where they're applying based off of their academic profile. So you look at your GPA, you look at your maybe a test score if you've taken the exams. You look at, oh, how many APs have I taken, that sort of thing. How do I kind of rank in my school or whatnot, right? And everybody is self-selecting where they're applying based off of that information. So what that means is that roughly speaking, at every college you apply to, 4 in 5 applicants at that college, including all the Ivy Leagues, Harvard, MIT, Stanford, whatever it is, 4 in 5 of the applicants at that school are academically capable of doing the work at that college. So that college believes that though 4 in 5 applicants are academically capable of doing the work at that college. Okay. As an example, Harvard gets 60,000 applicants a year. Roughly speaking, almost they believe 50,000 of those applicants for 2,000 spots that they pick, roughly 50,000 of those applicants are academically qualified to succeed at Harvard. Okay. But they can't pick that many. They pick 2,000, right? And so this is a really important concept, right? Where, okay, yes, you might be fairly strong academically, and being strong academically definitely helps versus sufficient academics, but it's really important to set yourself apart more than just academics, okay? And that's where the personal score comes in. And so what's fascinating here is that the essays, which are a critical part of the personal score, like what you write about and how you write about it, only 1 in 5 applicants set themselves apart, okay? And these are, you know, all of the students that you would say are, and this goes once again for like all the Ivies, all of, you know, every school, right? Because all the applicants are kind of similar academically, and, you know, some very successful academic students are also, you know, tend to be involved in a lot of different activities and that sort of thing, and extracurriculars. But once again, only 1 in 5 of those students are actually able to set themselves apart in a pool, applicant pool of other really highly motivated applicants. And so what this means is that, and this is what the data shows, is that having strong academics increase your admissions chances by 3x. Pretty good. But the strong non-academic side essays increase your admissions chances by 10x. All right. And so my point is that essays, having really strong essays and really being able to write about your experiences in an effective way that proves you're going to be successful in college and beyond is critical to the admissions process. Okay. So let's talk a little about when essays matter and when they matter less. So essays matter more for highly selective colleges. These are like the Ivy and Ivy equivalent type universities. Okay. But they also matter for selective colleges that have like a 15 to 50% admit rate. So like University of North Carolina, Michigan, Georgia Tech, you know, a lot of these schools, like the essays do really matter, right? Where your academics are sufficient, so they're kind of just above that academic bar, but not strong compared to other applicants, okay? This also matters for large colleges where you're applying to very highly desirable programs, such as computer science or a lot of other STEM programs, or very desirable out-of-state destinations like a University of North Carolina. But so, for example, University of Washington in Seattle has a fairly high admission rate across the entire university. But the computer science department, which has a very limited number of spots and a lot of applicants for the number of spots they have, is very, very selective, okay? And so when that starts happening, how do you differentiate between a lot of students that look basically the same on their applications academically? What you start doing is you start relying much more on the essays, okay? And so these more highly desirable programs at certain colleges, this could also be the business school at University of Indiana Bloomington is another example of this, okay? And so these are really highly desirable programs that a lot of students want to get into. They have a very limited number of spots. And so all of a sudden the essays start really mattering. Okay. Honors programs are like this, tend to be like this as well. Essays matter less for selective colleges where your academics are very strong compared to other applicants. So for example, Georgia Tech, it's roughly the same number of applicants per year as Harvard, but they also accept a lot more students. Okay. So they're happy to select a lot of students with really strong academics and just sufficient essays. Okay. They're perfectly fine with that. It's great. But you know, a lot of students, like, how do you know if you have strong academics compared to other students? And that's really hard to know, other applicants. That's just really hard to know. A good rule of thumb is, like, if you did take like the SAT or the ACT, you can actually look at your test score and you can look at, hey, was I in the top quartile? So the top quarter of all students that are applying to a given university. Are you in that top of admitted students? The top quarter of all admitted students, then that's a pretty good indication that you may have a strong academic profile. But that's changing quite a bit because of all the test optional and everything like that that's out there. Okay. But the reason why I'm mentioning that is that you know, a lot of people ask me, how do I have an indication if I'm going to be strong academically or not in a given applicant pool? And honestly, it's just really hard to know. And that's just one indicator. You can't really rely that much on like GPA, because different people take different courses, like different GPA calculations, like all of that's just really complicated. And the other place that essays matter less for is like large colleges where you're applying in-state or to less competitive programs. Those matter less, right? Those schools are just accepting a lot more students. They have higher admissions rates. They're looking for students that are successful academically, or likely going to succeed academically, and they're accepting those students. And that's perfectly fine as well. You still want to have a good essay, but it just matters less. Okay. But my general thought on this entire thing, and granted, I'm an essay and writing coach and writing instructor by trade. My general feeling on this entire thing is like, look, you don't necessarily know how this is going to play out. And so what you want to do is put your best foot forward on your essays, right? You really want to put some effort in. And the worst thing that can happen is you become a better writer as a result of it, okay? Which is an important skill that will help your student in college and also after they graduate, all right? Okay, so we're gonna talk a little bit about how many essays will you actually write across your applications, and we're gonna get into what are colleges actually looking for in essays, which is everybody's favorite part of the session. But a lot of people don't know that you might actually have a lot of essays to write. Okay. And you can start seeing this now within the Common Application. I can show you a tool that we have that will show you how many essays that you need to write. I'll show you that later. But generally speaking, the more selective the college is, so the lower the admission rate it is, the more essays that they want you to write. Some students, are writing just the Common Application essay, especially if you're applying like in-state to a less, maybe not the flagship university in-state. Other colleges, like selective colleges, will, like University of Michigan, I think, has 3 kind of these shorter, what's called supplemental essays. So you have to write the Common Application essay, then 3 more essays. Other colleges have 2 essays, some have 4. But by and large, like once you apply to all your schools, you might be writing 5 to 20 essays. And then for students that are applying to like multiple, like highly selective institutions, so Ivy type league, Ivy equivalent type colleges, might be writing 20, 40, 50, 60 essays. Because a lot of these schools have like, some of them have 6 essays, some of them have 8 essays. They're like 50 words in length to 250 words in length. So some are very short, some are a little bit longer. But the general gist of it is there's a lot of writing, a lot of things they want you to respond to. So that way they can get a better sense of who the student is and if the student's going to succeed in college and beyond. Okay. All right. So let's talk about what colleges are and aren't looking for in essays. But before we do, Debbie, do we have questions and things that have come in that we should be
Sure.
because you actually haven't interrupted me yet, and you're
I know
interrupted at least 2 or 3 times by now.
I have been responding directly to people. So,
oh, wow.
but there is a question which we'll kind of get to a little later. But maybe if you want, somebody's asking, is it a good idea to submit poetry when it asks for an essay on a topic of your choice?
Well, as we will learn, probably not. we'll talk a little bit about that, but generally speaking, like poetry is the topic of the poetry will tend to be difficult to prove success in college and beyond, as we're about to learn. Number one. And number two is poetry is often very difficult for a reader to understand, where they might need to read it multiple times to develop an understanding of it. Okay. In which case that's not what you want to do, because your admissions officer spends an average of 8 minutes per application, not just reading essays, but the entire application, making notes on it and everything. Okay. So a really critical thing that we're going to talk about is readability, which basically is like clearly writing your thoughts in a way that your reader is easily going to be able to understand them. So I think I've probably, in the tens of thousands of admissions essays that I've seen or more, I've maybe seen one be able to use poetry semi-effectively as a piece of a larger essay. So just to give you a sense, like hard and probably not what you want to do. Okay. And so why is that, right? So the purpose of the college application is to prove that your student will succeed in college and after they graduate. So how do they prove that? Which gets into this problem, okay? Because what you'll see a lot today in the examples of essays that we'll look at, and what you see online a lot, or what everybody tells you, and admissions officers say this as well, is like, hey, they're like, hey, essays are about telling your story, okay? Or admissions officers will say, hey, we just want to get to know you. Like, that's great, but that's actually very incomplete information. Because what you're trying to do is that essays are about telling your story in a way that proves that you're going to be successful in college and beyond. So there's a lot of things and topics that you can write about that are great stories, but they do not prove that you're going to be successful in college and beyond. Because what that requires is basically writing content and about your experiences that relate to one or more of these 5 traits that colleges are looking for in applicants. So very commonly, everybody's taking pictures of this, screenshots, whatever it is. You should do that. Highly recommend that. We have some articles on this, but this is really important as a concept as you're working with your students, right? So the most important thing is just to instill in your students, here's what colleges are actually looking for in applicants, because that will help them understand what to write about and how to write it, okay? So the first trait of the 5 traits is drive. So these are students that no matter kind of how challenging of a situation they find themselves within, they're going to get through these difficult or challenging situations and come out a better person. And they're not like passively sitting by and letting stuff happen to them. No, they're actively taking action to better their situation, okay? And this could be like anything from a family challenge that they have, to a schoolwork challenge, to a challenge that they have in a certain club or activity, to a challenge that might be related to like a topic that they're personally trying to learn. Or if you're a maker and you're making like robots or other things like that, hey, you have this challenge like coding something that you've never coded before. It could be anything, okay? But what's really important is identifying drive. So back a number of years ago, I was talking to the Dean of Admissions at MIT, Stu Schmill, because I'm an MIT alumni. And Stu was telling me, it's like, look, in a pool of highly motivated and highly driven applicants, we are looking for the applicants that are unusually driven. So even amongst the most driven students that are out there, we're looking for the ones that somehow are even more driven, okay? And the only way that they can really tell that is through the students writing. Like, what are they writing about and how do they actually write about it? What are the, like, it's not just enough to write about a challenge. It's like, what really matters is what is the outcome? And then what are the specific actions that that student took that maybe a lot of other students wouldn't have taken in that same situation that led to a better outcome. The second of the 5 traits is intellectual curiosity. These are students that love learning just for the fun of it in their free time, to gain a deeper understanding of the subjects and topics in which they're interested in, okay? A lot of students are intellectually curious and they don't realize that they should be writing about it in their essays because their intellectual curiosity is normal to them. They don't realize that it's different than other students, okay? Or they don't realize that it's something that an admissions officer would actually care about. Why does intellectual curiosity matter? Well, think about it, right? Students that are intellectually curious are going to be more likely to be academically successful in college, and they're going to be more likely to continue being a lifelong learner and therefore be more successful in life, right? Intellectual curiosity matters so much that at Emory University, their personal score is actually called the intellectual curiosity score, okay? Stanford has a supplemental essay that's kind of famous that's actually about like intellectual curiosity and topics that which students are interested in. And so on. And the common application essay also has a topic that's a prompt that's associated with this. So this really matters to colleges. The third is initiative. So these are students that are really entrepreneurial, not willing to accept the status quo, and basically anything that they're involved in, any activity, extracurricular, whatever it is, anything that they're involved in, that thing, they're identifying like how to make it better. And not only are they identifying how to make it better, they actually go forward, take action to make it better, okay? Colleges love students that take the initiative because guess what? They're the ones that when they get on campus, they're making the campus better. They're identifying problems in the student community. They're like forwarding things. And so by the time they leave campus, it's better as a result of their being there. And then also these are the leaders, right? These are the people that go forth after they graduate college and you know, a lot of times they're starting businesses, right? Or they're taking on leadership roles in various organizations and things, all reflecting well back on the university. The fourth is contribution, right? So these are students who, any group of people they're a part of, that group of people is far better as a result of their being there, okay? Colleges love contributors because these are the connective tissue across the entire student community. So if you think of like a huge part of the value that colleges bring to students, it's not just academics, but it's actually like that network of other students that you then have for the rest of your life, right? Your friend network, okay? And that's kind of a big thing that you're paying for in that alumni network and all of the positive feelings back to the university. A lot of that's actually created by these kind of super contributors, these people that are just making everything and everybody around them better, okay? So colleges love these types of people, and when they can identify them in applications, like they are trying to bring those people in. And the fifth is diversity of experiences. And a lot of times I say also diversity of interests, okay? So these are students with different life experiences, different interests, different ways of thinking about the world that can add unique perspectives to the student body such that students can actually learn from one another, okay? So a lot of times schools, you know, what they're trying to do is their mission is they want to have like a positive impact on the entire world, right? And on every industry. So that's why they're bringing in students with like from different geographic backgrounds, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different, you know, cultural backgrounds, right? They're bringing in people with different interests. Like they're bringing in people that are like makers, and they're bringing in people that are like thespians. They're bringing in people that are writers, right? All of these types of things really matter to them. And it matters so much that it actually has like a significant impact on admissions rates. So the example that I like to use, just because this data is public now, because there's a Supreme Court case coming up on the Harvard admissions department is involved in it. They had to publicly release a lot of information. And one of the really interesting pieces of information is that even though Harvard does not, like you're not applying to a specific major at Harvard, your intended major and career really does matter in the admissions process, okay? So about the admission rate for people that want to go into medicine is like at this point now below 4%, okay? The admission rate for people that want to be a teacher getting into Harvard is about 12%. So literally 3 times higher than for medicine, because medicine, everybody wants to go into medicine. A lot of people want to do that. But they don't want everybody, you know, everybody that goes to Harvard to want to be a doctor, right? They want people that also want to be teachers. They want people that are going to go into all sorts of different areas in life, and that does matter to them quite a bit. And now that doesn't mean like, hey, if you are really interested in medicine, you know, talk about how you want to be a teacher. Yeah, your essay content may and your experiences may not fit with what you're saying, but the reason why I'm mentioning this is like it really does matter, right? Your experiences, your interests really does play a role. Back when I was applying to college, because I got to actually read the admissions officer notes on my application, and I actually maybe I'll send those to you, Debbie. You can share them out with folks. It's pretty interesting. I have a whole write-up on it. Basically, the admissions officers, so I got into MIT, the admissions officers wrote two admissions officers wrote about 100 words each. Okay. And when I applied, I had to talk about like, what was I interested in doing in the future? And I wanted to be a roller coaster designer back in the day. Clearly I don't do that now, but in both of the admissions officer notes on my application, they're like, he wants to be a roller coaster designer, right? Like, it's like, it's like, hey, this is like like somebody that wants to do something very different than the general population. And I think that probably helped me, in the admissions process, because yes, my academics were strong. Yes, I was very driven, but like, was I that different than another random person they could have selected that was somewhat similar to me or scored similar to me on the application? Not really, probably. Right. So like, how do you actually write in ways that are going to differentiate you? Okay.
Brad, there's a good question. Somebody's asking, do you recommend that the essay try and touch on as many of these traits as possible, or just focus on one?
Yeah. So what I would say is focus on your strengths. Right. Now, a lot of really good essays are going to focus on strengths, but also touch on a little bit of the different other topics. Usually what we have students do is they'll brainstorm, they'll select kind of their 2 to 3 strengths, and they'll brainstorm most of their content related to those strengths. But oftentimes we'll see an essay that's really like very focused on drive, but it also has hints of like intellectual curiosity and taking the initiative. Okay. And what you want to do is like, because you're writing a bunch of different essays across your, for an application, is a lot of times what you want to do is not say, hey, I'm this really well-rounded student. Hey, let me show you drive in this essay. I'm going to show you initiative in this other essay, etc. No, you want to keep focused on your strengths, because what I was mentioning before was at MIT, the Dean of Admissions is like, we're looking for students that are unusually driven. Okay. Which generally means that it's not just like showing drive in one situation, it's showing drive in like over and over and over again. Okay. So like what you want to do is kind of pick your strengths, stick to the strengths, and just like keep providing example after example after example of you, of how you're performing those strengths. You know what, if you're not able to do that, that's perfectly fine too. And you could say, here's a great example of drive. Here's another one, really great example of intellectual curiosity that also maybe touches on drive a little bit. That does really matter, but you don't need to cover all of them in each essay. It's really hard to do. As I said, really want to focus on your strengths. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to get to some topics in just a second, but before we do, what does this mean? Okay. What this means is that content, clarity, readability are critically important, right? We have not talked one bit about how admissions officers are looking for something that's really creative. And we've not talked one bit about admissions officers that are looking for like some beautifully written prose. Okay. Guess what? Those are completely unnecessary things. And oftentimes when we see students trying to be creative, they then miss out on actually writing about the 5 traits, or they waste word count on writing about their experiences related, and not being able to write about as much content about their experiences related to the 5 traits. And then their essays or their writing becomes confusing. Okay. And now the admissions officer is reading this. They're like, I have no idea what's going on, right? I don't know how any of this is relevant to this student succeeding at my university or beyond. And they struggle with readability and clarity. These are big problems that a lot of essays have. And as we always say, when you look at kind of other example essays online, or you're looking at them, or your students, which now we're seeing all the time as they're watching TikTok videos about college essays from students that had just written college essays last year. These are all people that don't really know what about their essays actually got them in. Okay. Or maybe they got in despite their essays. Okay. Maybe they were an athlete. Maybe they were a legacy. You don't know. Okay. So don't, like, as we say, it's like, don't let the influencers influence your essay, because those influencers tend to not actually understand what their audience was looking for and aren't able to like dissect their own essay that they wrote and be able to call out the specific areas that the admissions officers would actually have highlighted as being important. Okay. This is really important. And if you're going to lead, because I bet you know, as I said, I haven't looked at the examples of essays, but every time I read just essay drafts that are sent to me, a lot of them are going to try to be creative, try to have beautiful prose. We're going to really struggle to read them in places. I'm going to like stumble over my words. I won't know what's going on. You probably won't know what's going on. These things happen. Okay. And you're going to see that a lot of them are probably not related to one or more of the 5 traits, or it's very weakly related to one or more of the 5 traits and could be strengthened in significant ways. We're going to see that. And we're going to talk about topics right now, because there's no such thing as a bad topic, provided it actually relates to one or more of these 5 traits. So a lot of times you'll hear, and we'll see in a second, don't write about athletics, don't write about band or drama or you know, / theater or athletics, right? Or community service. Like all those things tend to be true for like the majority of students that have done those things, because, you know, there's only so many essays you can read about, like, you know, some kid, you know, loving teamwork or just being really passionate about music, right? But you know what? Those are the problems with most of those essays, is they're not actually related to the 5 traits. Just not. Okay. Whereas like there are amazing essays that are related to band and athletics, etc., that are actually like, yeah, the scene or of the essay, or like what the, you know, the setting of the essay might be athletics or might be band, or might be a community service experience, but the actual theme of the essay, what the essay is really about, might be leadership or intellectual curiosity or drive, right? So the actual, you know, the setting is this other thing, but you know, what the essay is about is actually really compelling, right? And relates to the 5 traits. So this is very important, because we're going to take a look at some example topics right now. If you have, I wasn't able to fit all of them on one page that was sent in, so we didn't just kind of randomly pick some that fit. But if you have other questions that come in, Debbie's going to be kind of trying to identify ones that maybe we haven't covered. You know, when we take a look at full essays later, obviously we'll spend a little bit more time on this as well. But this is like really, really, really important stuff. Okay. Wow, there's a lot of words on this page because I tried to fit it all in. Okay. Whew. Got it. So the first couple of these are more like athletics, basically related. So my student would like to write about unexpectedly making a travel sports team in 8th grade, changed her trajectory in high school and life. She wants to write about how this coach believed in her, and also about how bullying from other players affected her. Is this a good topic, right? Want to avoid the sports cliche, right? We hear about that a lot. And so the challenge here is like a number of things, right? So like, how do you actually relate this to the 5 traits? Unexpectedly making a team? Like, why, right? Did you like practice a huge amount prior to that, like on your own? Okay. Then after you made the team, like what happened? Like, how did this actually change your trajectory in life? Did you become like more confident about something? What were other experiences that you can actually relate to this? Okay. Because on its own, you know, we find that people will write about this and they'll spend like 300 of their 650 words on like how they unexpectedly made the team in 8th grade. Okay. And typically speaking, like you only really want to write about high school oriented experiences in a significant way, because like 8th grade is a while ago, okay, at this point. And some people are writing about 3rd grade or 4th grade or 5th grade. We may see that in the essays later, because it's kind of a frequent occurrence. That doesn't really matter that much, because, you know, you're a completely different person now. But it can be an inciting incident, which I think this is alluding to, where, you know, they became a very changed person as a result of this. And so if that really was what we call an inciting incident, that could be maybe a sentence or 2 of the essay, but the essay is really about something else, right? Like how you use this opportunity to like really grow. And, you know, there's bullying from other players. That tends to be a difficult topic to write about, unless, you know, you were able to like overcome that in some way and kind of stop the bullying, or, you know, get to a better place with them and you know, kind of solve some of that situation. Just like talking about like, hey, somebody is bullying me and kind of I am, you know, a recipient of bad behavior of others. Like, yeah, that sucks. That's not great. You know, but at the same time, like, does that prove you're going to be successful in college and beyond? Like, that's the lens you need to take about, like, how does that relate to the 5 traits? You know, does this show like maybe there's a, you know, some conversations you had with them that kind of stopped it, and that shows a lot of contribution. Then you saw other people that were being bullied, and you then had conversations with those bullies, and that solved that situation. Now you're showing a lot of contribution, initiative, those types of things that can actually make for really compelling content, of like very difficult interpersonal interactions that you've had. But that, becomes an essay that's more about interpersonal interactions and how you've solved that and became a contributor to your community than, an athlete type thing. Okay. Next one, like, okay, challenge of being, a late bloomer physically, significantly effective playing time. A former dominant player became a bench warmer. Okay, once again, how does this relate to the 5 traits? How does this relate to future success? Writing about like accepting a different role can be very interesting if you had a very significant and positive contribution to your team after that with specific actions that you took. Maybe it was a leadership role, maybe you were training and improving and helping other players. So there's ways to make this kind of interesting or, pretty interesting from like a leadership initiative contribution perspective. There's another angle that we also see, which is like, hey, you just realized you had to work way harder, right? So you started, learning, started watching like Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo, a lot of the greats, their different moves. You spent hours practicing on your own. You significantly improved your abilities. You became a starter again. And, at the most critical moment of the season, you broke out one of the moves that you learned and you just happened to score the game-winning goal. Like all of a sudden, that's a really compelling essay that's showing like, hey, there was a big challenge that I faced. I was really driven. I was very intellectual curious, right? And I took that, the opportunity to really succeed, right? So you're actually talking about like, here was the challenge, here's the outcome that I achieved, and here's the actions that I took to get there. And that becomes a really compelling essay. Okay. Another one, we have somebody that's, whose son wanted to talk about being on the spectrum, right? We see this with, learning disabilities as well. We're going to talk about mental health, it looks like next. But the answer is like, that can be a really good topic. Okay. But you have to relate it to the 5 traits in some way, right? So oftentimes, students that are writing about this sort of topic, a learning disability or being on the spectrum, what they're doing is they're writing about like how are they using this kind of as a superpower to some degree, or like how have they kind of figured out life such that they're able to kind of succeed in different ways. Okay. And a lot of times that involves like drive, that involves like learning how to study or do different things like differently, right? Kind of getting outside of their comfort zone and like engaging with different activities, taking on leadership roles. There's a lot of really compelling things that can be there, but just talking about, okay, I'm, on the spectrum and, here's how I, act or behave, and here's what's happened to me as a result of it. That's not as interesting as like, what were the actions that the student actually, took, right, in different situations that show that they're going to be successful in college and beyond. With mental health and recovering, and so this is a very challenging topic to write about, and here's why, right? So anything that's mental health related, and this can apply a little bit to learning disabilities as well, is that your goal is to prove that you'll be successful in college and after you graduate. Okay. So if you're coming into college with potentially a mental health challenge, then all of a sudden that college is going to say, well, is that student now at risk of being successful in college and graduating? Okay. And then they have to decide, are they going to take that risk on? Okay. Now, this is like, I mean, it's not great, right? Nobody likes it, but this is just the practical situation of how they think about it. Okay. Because they can, honestly, like, yes, they want to accept the best students, but the exact students that fill the different seats at their university does not matter as much to each of the, the admissions officers than we would like to think it does. Okay. And so how do you write about this? And what it really matters is that most of the essay needs to not be like on like things that are happening to you that kind of put you in less of a good mental state, but rather that's kind of an inciting incident for like how you learned about yourself and grew and took other actions as a result of it, right? So if your worth is not based on the amount of things that you did, maybe what you learned is like, hey, you started prioritizing, here's the things that I didn't like, that I'm not as excited about doing, so I'm just not going to do those anymore. And here's the things that I really like doing. I'm going to spend even more time on those. And you get way better at those things. And all of a sudden, you're in a better mental state, but you're actually focused on the things that you really care about. And you're showing drive, you're showing intellectual curiosity, maybe you're showing initiative with different organizations you're a part of. And all of a sudden, this becomes like a really pretty compelling essay. But I would say that most of the essays that we read related to kind of anxiety, depression, different mental health related stuff, a lot of the students really struggle to write about it particularly effectively because it's still challenges that they're having. Okay. And so it's just want to mention that. I have another one, how reading literature had, shaped the student's personality. This is really challenging because you could show a good amount of intellectual curiosity by kind of showing the different types of literature you're reading, kind of your analysis of that literature, and like, how does that affect you? But what you want to do is you want to prove it, okay? Because a lot of people are wax philosophical in their essays about like, hey, here's what I learned about myself. Here's what I learned about the world. It's like, you're 17, 18, okay? Like, you don't have like some grand philosophical vision potentially of the world based on your experiences. And so what you want to do is you want to focus in on, hey, I read this literature. Here's what I kind of learned about myself. But here's how that actually affected me in my real life. Here's how that affected the actual actions that I took. Okay. And then all of a sudden you're showing intellectual curiosity or showing how you're applying that in your life, which may be related to initiative. It might relate a lot to diversity of experiences. Hey, here's an interest. Here's somebody that's really interested in literature. We want that type of person. So it can be an interesting essay topic. But the challenge is that when we see this, we see a lot of students that are writing about like, here's my favorite book, or here's like some important quotes that I have read. And then they just kind of write about like why that's important to them, but they're not really showing how they're applying it in life, right? It becomes more of like an academic paper than an actual like, hey, let me prove to you that I'm going to be successful in college and beyond, right? There's a way to kind of integrate both of those together. All right. Thinking about writing my college essay as an acceptance speech for a future Nobel Prize in literature that I hope to win. It will be highlighting my writing journey and style as a prospective English major. All right. So this is once again, like where sometimes like creative, trying to be too creative becomes very challenging. Okay. I don't like discouraging people from doing different or unique things, especially that might want to, go into something that's a little bit more writing related. But the most important thing here is, once again, you have to write in ways that relate to the 5 traits, okay, in some way. So if you're writing about your writing journey, make sure that really focuses a lot on like intellectual curiosity, drive, maybe something you've written that had like specific impacts on other people, like highlight those things, number one. And then number 2 is degree of difficulty for doing something like this is very high. And the reason why I say that is because, once again, what do we learn? It needs to be clear and readable, okay? And when students start trying to do these things, your reader is often just like, what is going on? Okay. So it needs to be very, very clear from the first sentences of the essay, like, what is happening? Okay. Why are you doing this? You kind of have to guide your reader through it. And so don't want to dissuade you from doing it, but like degree of difficulty, very, very high. And you're probably going to want a number of people to actually read your essay before you actually go through it. Okay. And like make sure that they could clearly understand and understand it very easily, very, within the first pass, and reading it very quickly. Red eyes, blue eyes are unique gene, finding a way to appreciate my uniqueness. Okay. Here is a situation where there's a metaphor. Okay. You're like, hey, I need to find a metaphor to write about in my college application essay. You don't need one. Okay. To me, like being redhead, having blue eyes, that's unique, great. But like, how's that really affected your life? You're probably just trying to use it as a metaphor to be like, hey, I'm unique. And here's the different ways that I'm unique. Okay. But does that really prove that you're going to be successful in college and beyond? Probably not, right? It's hard to just say, here's the ways that I'm unique, and like, you know, tying that in some way to like drive, intellectual curiosity, that sort of thing can be a little challenging. And the final, working with my, you know, special needs cousin has shaped me into wanting to become a teacher. That's an awesome topic to write about, because what's really helpful is writing about somebody's like journey that they're on, right? Like a period of personal growth, or here's like these things that I've gone through or experiences that I've had that kind of lead me to what, you know, I ideally may want to do in the future. That type of essay always plays really well, because what it does is, if you end your essay with like, here's kind of my ambitions for the future, here's kind of how my experiences tie to that, all of a sudden your reader can kind of picture you on school, you know, on the school campus. They can picture you in the classroom, you know, learning about those different topics. They can relate it back to your experiences with a special needs cousin, and they can look at you in the future, right? They can see you in the future after you graduate, kind of as a teacher working with special needs kids, right? It's, you know, can be a really compelling, you know, essay topic. And there's definitely ways to write about it that can make it even, you know, more compelling, kind of at the, you know, specific like content level of little additional piece of information that can be put in. All right, that was a lot.
Okay,
There's
actually,
to get through that relatively quickly.
There's actually two more interesting.
All right, two more you want to
highlight. That
okay.
Somebody shared. Okay, somebody's asking as a possible topic if they talk about overcoming health challenges through a special diet that they had to focus on and coming up with recipes to fit their lifestyle. Is that like, could that be turned into something?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think so, you know, because there's some people that are like, okay, so you have to make a change, right? And anytime that there's like a substantial change that you've made in your life, that can make a really good essay topic, because now you've had to like behave or work or learn about something and do something in a way that you hadn't done before. Okay. And so you could show a lot of intellectual curiosity around like, hey, how can I, you know, cook food in a way that, you know, my body is going to respond to the best, you know, for example. You can learn a lot about nutrition, not just recipes. You could test out making good recipes that actually taste good, right? Maybe your parents are like, hey, you're a better cook than us, right? Like these are, you know, there's a lot of things that can include. And what I like to do in these types of situations is also think about like, how does this also relate to other areas of my life and kind of what I do? Because then you can start tying things together. That's not just, hey, I'm just going to write about like nutrition and cooking and that sort of thing. But it might be like, well, you know, as a result of this, like I helped others, right? And with some, maybe it's different or different related, or maybe it's somewhat similar. But there's ways to kind of tie this to either other activities, other experiences that you have, other ways that you're spending your free time, that sort of thing, or ways that you've contributed to others. Okay, next, Debbie.
Next is somebody asking about writing about quitting their baseball team because the coaches screamed too much, and instead they got involved in a hiking and conservative group.
All right. So a couple of things. One is, does quitting the baseball team really matter in this situation? Okay, so you have to think about like, how is this like potentially going to be perceived? All right. Nobody really cares if you quit the baseball team, but you know, you also don't want an admissions officer thinking like, well, you know, Billy's a quitter, right? Like you don't want them thinking that. You know, oh, when the going gets tough, you know, problems, right? Because it's really hard to convey like just how bad of a situation you were in with the coach, and you're like, hey, I'm not gonna play college ball, so like I'm done, right? And that's fine, but like, does that matter to the admissions officer? Probably not. Okay, now getting involved with like the hiking and that sort of club, that could be fine. That could be an interesting topic. But once again, like, how do you relate it to the 5 traits, right? As just being involved in a hiking club as like a member of the club, not that interesting. You know, being some form of leader where you're like, hey, you're the one actually scheduling the hikes. You're the one like planning all the transportation. You're the one kind of in charge of everything. That's a lot different. Okay. And so on. Okay. So just kind of like these become difficult kind of situations. And like you basically anything you have to take a look at it, be like, hey, how is my admissions officer going to perceive the thing that they are reading? And are they going to perceive me in a potentially negative light in some way, right? And you want to decrease that risk because these people are reading pretty quick, right? And different people, you can give the same person like, the same essay to 5 different people and they'll have 5 different opinions about it, okay? And your goal, as I always say, is like to reduce the probability of misunderstanding. Okay. So you basically want to have all 5 of the people that read your essay have as close to the same summary of the essay of what was important, what you did, like the same view of the essay as possible. Okay. And that's really hard. And that's why you have to like really think about like clarity, readability, how are people going to perceive these different things? And this is like all stuff that we do as like writing coaches, because this is not like students have never written like this before, right? Where they really had to like consider their audience in a significant and meaningful way and how somebody might interpret it. Okay.
Right. Okay. One last question, which is kind of related to your discussion about the academic score and the personal score, but it's also related to essays. Somebody asked how important legacy is these days and whether that should be included in an essay.
It's really important, depends on the school, right? So I think it's something like legacies at Harvard are between a 70 and 80% admit rate, something like that. And the ones that aren't admitted tend to be the ones that are below the academic bar in some way, shape, or form, or, kind of are, sufficient with both academics and the personal score. And they're like, maybe not. But, it depends on the school quite a bit.
Yeah.
Different schools care a lot more about legacies than others. Harvard would
and it's not so bad to ask. You can ask an admissions officer that, because also some schools might want, if you're a legacy and you want to get value out of being a legacy, they ask legacies to apply sometimes in the early
so like
process.
the answer here is like, I probably wouldn't include it in my essays, because guess what, that's showing up elsewhere in your application. If it's not going to be directly like a parent, maybe it's a grandparent, that sort of thing, it might fit more in the additional information section than directly in the essay. Unless for some reason it's like, it could be part of a YS essay for a given school that can make sense, that, my grandfather went here, right? And my mother also went there, right? And, my mother and father met on campus, right? Like, stuff like that could fit in like a YS essay. It's like, okay, clearly like if we accept the student, they're going to come, right? Because like it's like, the University of Michigan is just like in our blood, right? Or Ohio State's like in our blood, right? And that's fine. But like for like the common application essay, probably not, and other supplements. There's other places to put it. Okay. Awesome.
Okay.
All right. So a couple things before we get to the actual reading of essays. The other thing that people make a huge mistake on is that they don't understand that every single essay is important. Every part of your application is important. Together, they're going to actually prove that you're going to be successful. So what a lot of people do is they spend a lot of time on the common application essay, and they spend almost no time on these extra supplemental essays that schools need to write. And you don't want to do that. And the reason for that is it's not like they score each essay separately. It's not like, hey, the common essay is worth 10 points and this 50-word supplemental essay is worth 1 point, right? They're not doing that, okay? What they're doing is they're reading the whole thing, and they're kind of using that information and their evaluation guides to basically come up with like what your personal score is, or however they score the non-academics part of the application. And so you don't want to do that, right? You want to really focus on every single essay, and then like how does that content across all the essays kind of fit together to produce like a coherent narrative about who you are as a student that's going to prove that you're going to be successful in college and beyond. That's basically what you want to do. And too many students like just wait till the last minute on these extra essays. And that's often the reason that students are not getting in. They'll never know that, but it's often the reason they don't get in. The Dean of Admissions at Richmond, we were doing an event a couple of years ago together. He said, he's like, I can always tell when the student wrote my supplemental essay the night before. And he thought, you know, there's either grammar errors, like it's not well structured, whatever it is, right? You can always tell they wrote the essay like the night before. It's like, why would I want to accept that student? Like, they don't necessarily want to come to the University of Richmond. Like, why would I want to accept that student if they're waiting till the last minute? Okay. And so you don't want admissions officers thinking like that. And you also want to make sure your content is really, really strong across all the essays, because every single word counts. Think about this, like your students, usually they're like, hey, you have to write this 3-page paper or this 5-page paper or this 7-page paper. And your students are like, oh, they're struggling to even get to that word count. Okay. Now think of admissions essays. You have a 650 word common application essay. You have a bunch of extra supplemental essays that might be 50 or 250 words, etc. There's really like under 2,000 written words on an application about your student. Okay. That's not like, hey, here's your family names and that sort of thing, like in your parents and other information like that. There's like less than 2,000 words. Like, so you have a very short little bit of space to actually prove that you're likely going to be successful in college and beyond. Okay. So just keep that in mind. It's really hard to actually, to prove it, right? And so, that's what we really work with students on, which I'll talk about in a second. But just like in terms of like a strategy for working on your applications because of this, is like you first want to start with planning your content you're going to use across all of your applications. So what happens is too many students are like, hey, I need to write the common application essay. And what they do is they go look at the common application essay prompts and they're like, hey, here's what I like. And then here's a topic that I can write about, response to it. It's a bad strategy. Instead, what you want to do is you want to say, here's everything is the most compelling about me as an applicant. And now I'm going to make sure that all of that content gets onto each application. Because we often find that students that are just kind of writing this stuff on their own, what ends up happening is they end up leaving off really important information about themselves on their applications that could be the difference to getting them in. No. Then write your common application essay. That's the first one. You write it about like the most compelling top content you have. Then you work application by application, right? You want to complete all of the essays for one application. Then you complete all your essays for your next application, right? And you want to focus on the ones that are your top choice schools first and your early action, early decision schools. The reason why you want to do that is because your student will get tired, basically, by the end of all application season. And what will happen is what will happen to me, as I only applied to 4 colleges, but I was about to apply to Caltech. It was the night before the application was due, and I had to mail it because it's a long time ago and the internet wasn't really a thing for applying. And I was like, sat down to write my essays, looked at it, and I was like, nah, I'm good. And I didn't even apply. Okay. So like, you don't want to, like, that will happen eventually, but you want to work application by application. That's also really important because a lot of the essays start becoming relatively similar. So you want to have a really, really good YS essay for one school, and then your student will be able to apply what they learned in that essay to writing the essay for the next school, right? But a lot of students are like, hey, I'm going to write all of my Y essays at the same time. It's like, well, now all of the drafts are not good, right? So it's just like, this is what happens. But you also want to really set a goal of at least 2 weeks before each deadline to have the entire application done, submit it. And then, that will kind of really reduce, your stress, your student stress kind of throughout this entire process. Our goal as writing coaches is to make the application and essay process simple and stress-free. And also that it just takes a lot less time for your students to do it.
So Brad, there was a question about the process, and somebody said, should I write 2 essays and then at the end decide which one is better? And I'm wondering if that really kind of is part, there should be more work as part of the brainstorming to kind of flesh through.
So like you should, the answer to that is we see that a good amount, and it's usually people coming to us like that haven't started us coaching them yet, and it's just kind of a waste of everybody's time, really, ultimately, and really more of a waste of your time than anything, Because what you want to do first, and we have tools that I'll show you that help you do this right after we talk about our coaching. I'll show you kind of some of the free tools and how to access them actually within the Prompt platform. They'll actually help you kind of go through this process. And this is the process we go through with every single one of our students, is we actually help plan the content you're going to use across your entire application first. So you prioritize what's your most compelling content, then you're more easily able to match that to the essays. Okay. Because when we read those essays and we're like, hey, which one is more compelling? What it is which one has the most compelling content? Okay. Now, the challenge when you have two different drafts is like you start asking a bunch of questions about both drafts to like really get to like, okay, because a lot of students don't include their most compelling content in their first draft. Like you usually have to push them to get to that point. And so planning everything at the beginning of the process just is really important. And I know that writing planning is not taught basically in schools at all. As a writing, instructor and somebody that spent a lot of time with this, that happens. It does. And so most students, they don't plan their writing. They just don't. And we work with students to actually walk them through that process and actually plan their writing. And it saves you hours and hours and hours of time on the back end, because you actually start with, and plus students are way more confident. They're like, yes, I know exactly what I'm going to write about. I'm really excited about all this. And then it's way easier for them to get started with each of their essays. Okay. Because basically what we do is we map the content to the essays. That's what you want to do. You don't want to be like, hey, here's the essays. Let me think about what I want to write about for each essay. That's not as helpful. Okay. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about our coaching. Then, as I said, we'll show you around this platform a little bit because there's some great free resources. Then we'll do a bunch of essays for however long Debbie and I want to stick around. All right. So our goal, right? We want to make your students' application impossible to ignore. Okay. And so, as I said, we talked about a lot of applicants the same, right? On their applications, right? Similar academics. Everybody's got a bunch of different extracurriculars. So like, how are you setting yourself apart? How are you standing out, right? How can you help yourself get in? Not everybody's going to randomly write about becoming a roller coaster designer, right? Who knew, right? Clearly I don't do that, but that is the gist of it. So a little bit about us, right? So we're the highest rated, most recommended application and essay coaching company. 98% of the students that we work with get accepted to one or more of their reach or target colleges, right? So these are what we consider like their top choices. 3 and 4 students we work with get accepted to one or more of their reach colleges. So these are often like IB or Ivy equivalent type universities. Often where the students have below the average academic profile of an admitted student. We work with thousands and thousands of students, so we get a bunch of acceptances at every top 100 college every year. We've reviewed over 150,000 essays. We've coached over 30,000 students over the years. We're also recommended by a lot of high school counselors. Over 250 high schools actually recommend our application and essay coaching services. And if you do some research, we're often half the price or less of comparable options. Okay. And we have a bunch of free resources. A lot of that, if your students are eligible for free and reduced lunch, there's ways to kind of sign up on our program, and you can actually get access to free boot camps and reviews for those purposes. And we have some awesome, I know, last year, or was it 2 years ago? I know we actually, one of the students we were coaching, she won the like a New York Times scholarship for her essay, which was really cool. I think it was like $10,000+ or whatever it was. It was awesome. Cool. All right. So that's kind of the general gist of it. In terms of kind of how we work with students, or we always get asked, is basically, what is the biggest value that we provide, right? So one is we help your student develop their brand. Okay. This is really about like identifying which of these traits or versions of that traits are similar. What are the personality traits that you really want to have come across in your application that could improve success in college and beyond, right? We're helping students plan, right? So identifying what to write about for every single part of every application, making your students' ideas really concise and compelling. As I said, most students have never really had to write on a really tight word count before, okay? Most first drafts that we get of essays, let's say it's a 650 word essay, we find that usually we can cut 50 to 60% of those word counts without losing any meaning for most students. Okay, what does that mean? All of a sudden, you now have a lot more word count to fit in more compelling content, more content that your that can, tell your story in a more significant and meaningful way. To admissions officers that prove they're going to be successful in college and beyond. You can now start including a lot more different experiences that show, hey, I was driven here and I was driven here and I was driven in this time in this situation, or intellectually curious in all these different situations. That's really important, okay? And working with a writing coach can do that. Making your students' writing clear. What did we just talk about, right? We've spent a lot of time talking about like making sure it's really readable, right? That you reduce the chances of misunderstanding, right? You want as many people to read it as possible, and they're going to come away thinking the same thing. And then the final thing is holding your student accountable to actually getting the work done and getting it done early. Okay. So as we talked about, a lot of students, and if you haven't gone through this process yet with a student, they're going to procrastinate and they're going to wait till the last minute, right? They're going to do what I did with Caltech, right? Basically, they're just not even going to apply in some cases, or they're going to write their essays haphazard at the last minute, and you're going to be fighting with them over getting the applications and stuff done. Don't do that, right? We are also an accountability coach, making sure that the student signs up for a timeline and holding them accountable to that timeline. All right. We're the perfect coach for your student. We have over 100 coaches. We hire the top 2% of writing coaches. How do we know that? Well, we get thousands of applicants a year. We have a rigorous training and evaluation process for all of our coaches. Our coaches are all employees of ours, meaning that they're doing hundreds and hundreds of hours of coaching every single year with us. We select your coach based off of their college lists, their ambitions, their personality, that sort of thing. We match them up, right? In terms of how we work one-on-one with students. We also have these small group boot camps that a bunch of people use, but by far our most popular is just working one-on-one with an essay coach. We have an application advisor that keeps your student on track to make sure they're finishing their applications early, and you can communicate with at any time if you want. And then a writing coach that actually helps plan the content, revise the writing, provide feedback on all the, every essay that the student is writing. So there's kind of two general product categories we have. You can work with us just on the personal statement, like the common application essay or applied Texas essay. This is great for students that, might be applying, like boot camps for students that might be applying to colleges where essays matter maybe a little bit less with them. And our one-on-one coaching is perfect for students who need a strong essay, but may not have many of those extra supplemental essays to write. When we work with students, they're usually done with their common app essay within 2 weeks of starting. It takes less than 8 hours of their time, and they receive 4 to 5 hours of one-on-one coaching on average, although it's unlimited. So as many reviews or video calls as there need to kind of get you and your coach to be confident in the application that they're submitting. Okay, we have a special deal going through midnight tomorrow. We have a discount this week for you all. But we have an extra discount, as you can see here, of an extra $50 off this evening on our one-on-one coaching. If you're not sure kind of how to get started with us, because I'm going to talk about our next complete application coaching, just buying that, and you can always upgrade later. Although the price for upgrading may be a bit higher. The other thing is completely satisfaction guaranteed. So if you're not satisfied after your first coaching session with us, you can get a full refund. All right. Next, we have full complete application support. So this is literally every single essay for applying to 3 schools, 6 schools, or all of your schools. We're not just doing essays, we're doing any school specific extra thing, like there might be a school specific scholarship, honors programs, majors, portfolios, all sorts of other essays that may need to be written. We're helping you with your activities list, additional information section, planning all of your content and kind of helping you through every single part of this. Students are often getting, if we're working with them on all of their schools, which a lot of students that might be applying to multiple IB or IB equivalent schools are using, they're getting 50 plus hours of coaching time. But you're also working much smarter. So you might only take you like 50 hours of your time by working with a coach rather than maybe 100 or 200 hours on your own. And this is really important. As I said, there's extra deals going on right now. You might be able to get an extra $50 or $150 off if you're interested in this. Once again, it's fully satisfaction guaranteed. You can talk with us by going to prompt.com/road to college. You could sign up for a time for us to book to call you if you're interested in this, or go ahead and make a purchase. The first thing that you do with us is you talk to your application advisor, and they can kind of walk you through everything, make sure you have the right, kind of in the right product for what you're looking to do. And then, get you started with your writing coach. Okay. So we're going to get into a bunch of stuff now, but as I said, go to prompt.com/road to college, and which is this website right here. You can talk to a coach, you can view pricing and purchase, you can find out more information about us, read some reviews, all of that sort of fun stuff is here. The one other thing I'll just call out is our free resources. So here you'll see something that says here for the free resources. Click here, right? Go do that, or you can click sign up here, and you can create a free account, and that will take you in here. We have a couple of really cool things. One is this My Schools button, so you can add all of the schools that you're applying to, and then you can basically, we will create a list of every single essay that you need to write. So Brown University here, you can see all of the additional essays that you need to write. You can select essays, so you can actually select which of the actual optional essays you're going to write, such as this extra one for a School of Engineering. And this is really helpful because otherwise you actually have to go through each of the applications in the common application to find all of these essays. And some of these essays kind of only appear after you complete other parts of the application. So oftentimes we find students kind of at the end of this like tend to struggle a little bit with things as well. Okay. All right. And I think that is about it. We have these brainstorm essay ideas, and here you can go check out kind of like helps you plan all your content for your essays and that sort of thing. Okay. We're going to take a look at a couple of essays. Debbie, I think I've gone on for a while.
I know. I told people.
And this was a little bit like, I probably shouldn't have spent as much time on topics today as I had in the past.
I know, so. But I told people to hang in there because
we'll do a couple.
It's good to see these.
Yeah, we'll do like two, and
okay.
We'll call it a night.
Yeah.
If anybody has any questions about anything, they can just message me at brad@prompt.com. You can drop that in the chat. As I said, please take advantage of our coaching services. We work with thousands of students a year and with great success. All right, so we're going to start with this essay, and then I'm going to pull up another one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read it out loud. And what I want everybody to do as I'm reading this is I want you to write out in the chat kind of which of the 5 traits are you seeing, or other traits that may not be associated with the 5 traits or kind of similar that you're actually seeing kind of within this essay, number 1. And then number 2 is like, what didn't you learn that you actually wanted to learn? Okay, those are kind of a couple of the really important questions. All right. You have that same look when you're concentrating as you did when you were 5 years old, my mom declared with a wistful smile as I made my finishing strokes on my Mayan calendar. A wooden model, of course, not the real thing, but to me, it didn't make a difference. These kits consisted of several sheets of thin wood and shapes to be punched out and assembled following instructions, have been a source of immense joy for me throughout my entire life. Before advancing to these more complicated models, I thrived on Legos. Before that, even massive wooden blocks. For me, these puzzle-like toys provided an outlet for my energy projects with a designated beginning and end on which I could spend countless hours working. The appeal to me throughout the years lies not in the toys themselves, but in their structured nature, instructions, connecting pieces 1 to 2, 3 to 4, and so on. And ever so gradually, a thing takes shape out of pieces of nothing. Lego bricks, wood sheets. This thing, the very object that the wooden model is designed to create, is concrete, steadfast. The wood has already been cut, the Lego pieces selected, and the package sealed. In the solitary function, these models provide security. Unlike an art set, for example, a kit has a singular purpose of creating a specific curated product. There's no room for imperfection, and no gray areas exist in which mediocre paint strokes outside the lines taint the result. I have no power to dictate what the final product is, controlling only whether it is completed successfully or not. That isn't to say I dislike creative freedom. Rather, I find it a hugely refreshing change of pace to simply follow instructions step by step, step after step, until finally reaching a predetermined end. And my life cluttered with choices and opportunities, if not requirements to express myself, whether it be the game of soccer, music on my clarinet, or open-ended assignments in school, I take comfort in being told what to do and plainly doing just that without the burden of having to contemplate how, why, or to what end I am. Of course, I cherish opportunities to exercise my innovative visions on the field and on my instrument and wholeheartedly embrace them. There's nothing I enjoy more than watching my teammates finish off a perfectly executed cross after having built the play up from the back of our field in a competitive match, experiencing true creativity as we work to find options for passes and weave the ball between our opponents. Likewise, I bask in the applause from audience members after successfully performing a beautiful symphony alongside my fellow musicians, all of whom interpret their parts individually, implementing their own talents to play each note not only correctly, but also melodically and expressively. In the classroom, I savor positive marks from my teachers on my essays, thriving off their comments as I begin to grasp their perceptions of my response to their original prompts, all of which are entirely abstract to begin with. In fact, I cherish the fruits of artistic work to the utmost extent, as I believe it reflects an entirely separate level of my character in person. However, these aforementioned sets and models provide a different type of satisfaction, a much more rudimentary one that lies in their simplicity, the gratification of accomplishing a definite project. Even of a small wooden model is unparalleled, in part because it is a strict metric of success with no individual interpretation, such as the applause of an audience. My ability to complete these models is a task of right or wrong, a black and white what matter that fulfills me in a world of color. All right. As I said, drop into the chat. What were the traits that you found kind of out through this? And then what didn't you learn that you wanted to learn? Debbie, what do we have? Anything?
Someone is saying they see intellectual curiosity, drive, diversity of experiences.
Yeah. And then the other question I always ask is like, how strong, right, are these, right? And so my biggest challenge with this essay, kind of as I was reading, was I kept thinking, I was like, how is this relevant to the student being successful?
Right.
This student is like very much writing in a way that is paint by number. Like, I really like kits. I like following the instructions. Okay. And an admissions officer might think, well, there's not really instructions to life. It's not really instructions to succeeding at college. Okay. What happens if the student comes into a challenging situation? Are they going to get through it? All right. It's an open question. Now, with Drive, okay, doing these puzzle-like toys, that's great, but like, how frequently are they doing them? Right? Like, how much time are they spending on them? Are there like different, unique, or challenging things that they're having to learn or improve kind of as they're going through this? To me, like, I this whole thing around like kits and being interested in that and tying that to something with their lives or other experiences they may have is maybe a few sentences of a much broader essay. And I probably would maybe even consider leaving it out entirely. Okay. But where things got a little bit confusing to me was, I'm like, okay, this is where it's going. Okay, we're getting into creative freedom, but then I don't really learn much about the creative freedom other than, okay, they're playing an instrument. Okay, that's great. But are they writing their own music? Are they like, what is the creative freedom there, right? Or on the soccer field, right? Like, what's the intellectual curiosity? Like, what's really kind of happening here? Like, how are you actually growing or improving these skills in some way? They're talking about like their teammates or other people receiving applause, other things like that in here. It's like, well, what was their impact? Like, what was this student's impact on those other people, right? They're talking about, the fruits. So basically, this felt to me like the student was writing this and realizing like, oh shoot, like I kind of see that like I'm becoming like this paint by number person. So now I need to say that I like creative freedom, right? And then I like artistic expression and, showing innovation, right? And the entire essay is like, now I'm kind of thrown for like a different loop, right? Later on in the essay. But from the beginning of the essay, I'm just reading this and I'm like, oh, okay, here's somebody that like likes following instructions, right? And now I'm reading this, I'm like, well, they're not saying that, but then they're saying they prefer the instructions. So it's just like a difficult thing. And as I said, like, this probably is not the topic that I would choose to write about as the student. The student, chances are, has a much more interesting piece of content to write about. Okay, whether or not some of these things tie into that, maybe it's a few sentences of it, but chances are it may not can include it at all.
Yeah, and somebody actually mentioned, and I agree, we actually didn't really learn that much about the student.
That's
very
surface
level.
Very surface. It's very surface level, right? This is like, what was the challenge, like what was the outcome of like, maybe one of these kits was like really challenging. Like maybe they like make these kits and then like go to competitions and like, show like their intricate Mayan calendars, right? Or whatever it is. Like, I don't know. And like, maybe they've won a bunch of awards and now I'm like,
Or
oh,
maybe they made their own kit with their own set of
yeah, made their own
instructions.
thing and then sold them. Like,
Yeah.
it's so many different things, right? Like but yeah, this is where, and by the way, like, don't be like upset with yourself. Like if this is your essay, right? This is like, once again, everybody says like, tell your story or tell a story, but they're not saying like what the story needs to be about. Okay. They're being deliberately vague. And because they don't want to like have all essays that are about like intellectual curiosity, right? But you need to understand what they're looking for as admissions officers, and that's where like kind of brainstorming the content comes in. Okay. All right, we're gonna pull up another essay. Looks like we're doing Master Station F. Okay.
Okay, well, actually, that's a good question before you, because there was the question, do you need a title?
Now, and like, here's the problem. If a title like provides me with a sense of what the essay is going to be about within like 3 to 5 words, then maybe it can be okay to have a title, right? Because I need to have a very, like, readability matters. This one has a title, Master Station F. I have no idea what Master Station F is. Like, it adds a 0 value, right, to the essay. And sorry if I'm coming across as harsh. It's been a long day. All right. So a lot of essays today. All right. Maximize every moment and always be prepared. That's what they say about life and for every situation. In 2017, I was able to live this quote up to a T. So that was 5 years ago, by the way. So this student's probably in middle school. That's the other thing I just want to mention before I continue is a lot of students are really vague about time in their essays. Okay. And a lot of times it's like, same with that previous essay. I'm like, well, when were you doing these kits? You're talking about like something since you were 5, like, I don't know, like, are you still doing this? Like, was this 4 years ago? I have no idea. Okay. And that's like pretty important. And then also like, if it's 2017, like I could do the math really quick and it's like, well, that was a while ago. Right. And so something in middle school is generally not something you want to write about and or at least spend a lot of time on in an essay about. Okay. We were on a Carnival cruise and my family and I all together on the world's largest cruise boat. My cousins are all the same age as my brother and myself. For us, this was the best thing since sliced bread. It was a new experience and a whole new adventure for us to conquer. This cruise went from Jacksonville to the Bahamas, then back to Tampa. As we boarded the cruise, we were given a tour guide and a safety briefing. They walk us through the boat where everything is, what we need to know, and how to get everywhere. Throughout the safety briefing, we were informed who our go-to person was. The person was practically our lifeline at this point of any emergency. They told us what to do, where to go, and how to react to the situation. Our person told us that in case of emergency, the place we must go was Master Station F. That was the security and safety checkpoint for our region of the boat. With this information started the beginning of the plan in case of emergency. As we were going through the cruise on the way back to the States from the Bahamas, we get hit with the outer edge of a hurricane that was forming over the mid-Atlantic region. At this point, they have sounded the safety sirens to cause everyone on the boat to either move off the deck, the top deck, or to go to a place with a roof over their head. This was the part where Master Station F and the plan I had been creating came into play. When the sirens are sounding, they have an all hands on deck trying to help bring the umbrellas inside, then the lounge chairs, then they're trying to close over the pool and bring in or break down anything that could be broken down or potentially hurt someone. At this point, I was around 8 years old and I had to plan for everything. So when this happened, my brain went directly to the safety briefing and the quote. When the siren went off, I stayed calm, cool, and collected and stayed with the plan I was told during the briefing. While most people went into a craze of panic because they were at the briefing, they were not aware of the potential situations. They were in the idea that nothing can happen to us. We are on vacation. Although I was little, my mission was to find my family and to help assist everyone to our designated emergency on Master Station F. As I was doing this, I've been getting weird glances from people across our area. It must have seemed like I had 3 heads, but they weren't looking at me because of that. They were more impressed in trying to figure out how it is put together and more prepared than most adults during a crisis, spur of the moment. With having this quote in mind and having it come into play at such a young age, I learned that in the event something happens, always have a plan and always stay calm. I've been able to do this since such a young age. It almost feels like second nature at this point. This experience was an eye-opening experience, not only for that one moment, nonetheless, to go forward of life. I'm now able to understand what it means to maximize every moment, always be prepared. This experience applies to the future, as if something happens in school with a group or any event, I could take full advantage of everything happening to help better myself. However, while doing this, I'm able to quickly but certainly make a sustainable plan to help handle and better the situation I'm faced with. Okay, so real quick, we'll wrap up. But basically, the general gist of this is, this is fairly common of what we see in a lot of essays and what a lot of admissions officers see. I mean, this is probably like what half or more of essays do, which is like, let me pick a moment in time or a particular story, tell just that piece of the story, and then wrap it up with a paragraph that somehow relates to the rest of my life. Okay. Yes, this happened when the student was young. Yes, we don't really learn too much about the student. Yes, they were calm, maybe under pressure, but if they really did, this was an important moment in their life where they actually always had a plan. Now you're saying you always have a plan. Well, you should be able to rattle off 4 or 5 other difficult scenarios where you had a plan and were able to get through. Okay. So if that was the case, and this was a really important and meaningful moment in your life, you could probably write this entire first part of the essay within 3 to 4 sentences at the beginning and be like, hey, I've always had a plan, even since I was 8. Look at me. I followed the instructions on this boat, this challenging situation, and like I impressed the adults. This became a part of who I was. So I always had a plan. Here's another example of me having a plan and having this become
this is too much detail on
one. Here's another example of me having a plan, and so you want to just like hit people over the head with like, hey, I am this person, I'm the planner, right? I always know what to do and I'm always thinking about that. So like, let me give you 4 or 5 examples of me doing that. And it just so happens to be that like this important moment in my life happened like on this boat. And so I'm going to kick off my essay with 3 or 4 sentences about that, and that is it. Okay. But most of the time, like, you may not be able to answer that question. Like maybe you don't really have a plan all the time and can write compellingly about it. And this is just not a good topic for an essay. Okay. But once again, like this is so common. Like it's so common for people to write about like different, small experiences that they've had in their lives and think that that's going to be an important and meaningful essay. What you want is like to really highlight a number of different things like over a longer period of time that has happened, that has resulted in who you are now. Okay. And maybe tied to your future ambitions in some way. All right. Whew. So we're going to wrap up now. Thanks, Debbie. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you, Brad.
This evening. Make sure you take advantage of working with one of our college application essay coaches. If you don't, make sure you take advantage of some of the free resources that we have.
And just, Brad, somebody asked, is it too late to start with working with you guys?
No, we're starting with hundreds and hundreds of students this month alone. So it's not too late. We have students that sign up everywhere, like even a week before the deadlines. So we try to accommodate everybody that we can, but like you should get started now.
Yeah.
And ideally, if it's before your school starts, like you can get a lot of work done before school starts and you'll feel much better about it.
I mean, even the planning part of it, the figuring out what the, brainstorming the essay topics, it just kind of, it gives people more confidence in what the plan is.
Yeah, I mean, it's really important, especially I know a lot of people have school that starts maybe after Labor Day. You can get most of the essays for your top choice school done basically before Labor Day. Okay. Which you're just going to feel great about, because as your students' friends are like scrambling for essays and scrambling with college applications, you're going to feel really good to be about done. Okay. All right. If you DM'd me, I did not check this chat at all. People sometimes DM me. Please just email me. It's brad@prompt.com and I'll be responsive. Okay. And I'll be online for a bit more this evening. So if you have questions, just like feel free to go ahead and just message me. I'll probably respond this evening.
Thanks, Brett. As always, I love Brett truly just picks those essays like he never has seen
No,
them
I
before.
literally, it's like whatever
yeah.
whatever was coming up, but
Yeah.
it is what it is.
And they're kind of always good examples of what a lot of other
yeah, no,
students
it's
tend
just
to
like,
do.
because I mean, it's just that's how it is. And but the good news is when you see this and then you see like what your student is going to be capable of getting to, you're going to understand that your essays are going to be in that top group. Okay, like because these are similar essays. Like we see this problem across, like, you know, no matter where students are applying, right? A lot of students have similar issues. Okay, all right, thanks everybody.
Everybody, good night.
Have
Thank
a great
you, Brad.
evening.
Bye.
Bye bye.